Before we get into this, if you care about serious history, real survival knowledge, and the small overlooked details that actually kept people alive during the darkest years of the 20th century, subscribe to The Prepper Historian right now. This channel isn't about nostalgia or surface-level facts. It's about understanding what worked, why it worked, and how those lessons still matter today. World War II wasn't survived by heroics alone. For millions of ordinary families, survival came down to a handful of humble tools used daily, quietly, and with discipline. These weren't luxury items or military gear. They were practical objects that solved constant problems: hunger, cold, disease, and insecurity. Let's get straight into the tools that made the difference. Why ordinary tools mattered more than bravery during wartime scarcity. The romantic version of World War II focuses on battles and leaders, but families lived in a world of ration cards, bombed infrastructure, blackouts and shortages. Tools mattered because they reduced dependence. Anything that allowed a household to cook without fuel, preserve food without refrigeration, or repair instead of replace was a survival advantage. The families who lasted longest weren't the strongest, but the most resourceful. The pressure cooker became a quiet weapon against hunger. In occupied Europe and rationed Britain, fuel was scarce and food tougher than ever. Pressure cookers allowed families to cook beans, grains, bones and root vegetables quickly while using less fuel. Tough cuts of meat that were otherwise inedible became nourishing meals. A modern prepper can apply this today by learning pressure cooking not for convenience, but efficiency. Cooking dried legumes instead of canned ones saves money, energy, and storage space, just as it did in the 1940s. Hand tools, they really replaced broken supply chains and saved households from collapse. Simple tools like handsaws, braces, chisels, and files kept homes functional when hardware stores were empty or destroyed. Broken chairs were repaired, crates became furniture, and scrap wood became fuel. Families who owned tools didn't need to barter constantly or depend on others. Even today, owning and knowing how to use basic hand tools means independence when supply chains fail. Practice repairing instead of replacing, I'd say. Tjadfurt. These families didn't DIY for fun. They did it to survive winter. The sewing kit, quietly, kept families clothed and warm. Clothing was rationed, and new garments were rare, you see. Sewing kits weren't hobbies. They were survival tools. Mothers turned curtains into coats, patched socks endlessly, and resized clothing as children grew. Buttons, needles, and thread truly extended the life of every garment. A modern application is learning basic repair and alteration. Just a single needle and strong thread can add years to clothing when replacement isn't possible. The root cellar and food storage containers, they protected calories from time and theft. Refrigeration was rare, electricity unreliable, and food, honestly, was precious. Root cellars, jars, tins and crocks preserved potatoes, carrots, cabbage fats and grains. Families layered straw, controlled humidity, and rotated supplies carefully. This wasn't stockpiling for comfort. It was calculated survival. Today, anyone serious about preparedness should practice storing food without relying on electricity. Learn what keeps in cool darkness and how long it lasts. The hand crank radio connected families to truth and warning. Information was survival. Radios powered without electricity kept families informed about air raids, troop movements and occupation rules. In many places, listening was illegal, but the risk was worth it. Knowing when to flee, hide or prepare could mean life or death. Today, emergency radios with hand cranks or solar power serve the same function. Information remains a critical survival resource, especially when official channels fail. The bicycle became a lifeline when fuel disappeared. Gasoline was reserved for the military. Bicycles transported food, messages and people across bombed cities and countryside alike. They were silent, repairable and efficient. Tires were patched repeatedly, frames welded, chains cleaned obsessively. For modern preparedness, a well-maintained bicycle with spare parts offers mobility when vehicles are useless. World War II families understood that mobility equals options. The first aid kit, often prevented small injuries from becoming fatal. Antibiotics were, limited or sometimes just unavailable. Even a simple cut could honestly become deadly. Families relied on bandages, antiseptics, herbal knowledge, and really strict hygiene. Boiled water, clean cloth, and a bit of discipline saved lives. So, today's lesson is pretty clear. Learn basic wound care and infection prevention. Stock up on supplies, but more importantly, make sure you learn the skills. The notebook and pencil, believe it or not, recorded rationing, debts and survival plans. Paper really mattered. Families tracked food, favours, debts and schedules with it. Memory, especially under stress, failed, but written records didn't. This habit reduced waste and conflict, plain and simple. Even today, maintaining written plans, inventories and contacts is still one of the simplest and most effective preparedness tools. World War II survival wasn't about stockpiles alone. It was really about tools paired with knowledge, discipline and routine. These families didn't just wait around for rescue. They adapted daily with what they had, making do day in and day out. If this kind of deep, practical history matters to you, go ahead and subscribe to The Prepper Historian. Share this with someone who thinks survival is just about gear instead of skill. History's already tested these tools, and, they passed.